Okay, so cool. Is this where post happens?
So yeah, this is the final stage where we put it up in a theater. We do color correction in here. So this room is where you would come in and look at the color correction, and we'd work with a colorist to set the mood and look. The heavy lifting happens on workstations, and that's where we actually assemble all of the footage and do the stitching.
Okay. And so when the colorist comes in, are they actually coloring in VR? Or like the actual stitching is already done, or when do they?
Yeah, so basically you do your stitching first. So from onset, you make your dailies, and then you go to editorial. So it's kind of like a classic editorial where you're working with a single string out, and then you do your editing, and then we come into final stitching. Final stitching, we end here. And that's when you set the final look and color. And then sometimes it'll actually go back into VFX, and then we'll add the VFX. So here in this facility, we work very closely with the VFX department and the color department.
So then traditionally, it's the same process.
Yeah, it's the same. Like stitching is when VR first sort of kicked off, was like the hard part. People had to sort of wrap their head around. And now, they make different programs and they have things down now, like they use Nuke. It's a much faster, more robust system. But stitching essentially is just taking all of the cameras, like he was talking about the multiple cameras. It could be 8, it could be 6, it could be 20.
Okay.
And they stitch them all together and seam them together. So that way, when you look around, they're all blended together.
Right.
And there's nothing missing in the seams.
Right.
Yeah.
So by the time that footage arrives here, it's already stitched together, and then your telesending artist is coloring.
Then
the
it goes
footage.
back to the traditional filmmaking,
Okay.
editorial style.
Okay.
You ingest it, pull it up, color it like you would anything else, do any visual effects and so forth.
Got
so
it.
that's what I like about VR. At first it's kind of like, oh wow, I got to go through this whole new learning curve, which you do, but as they walk me through it, especially get into the narrative side, there's a lot more that goes on, and then the sound as well, which is a very big deal, which you can kind of talk about too.
Yeah, I think, one of the most overwhelming things for new filmmakers is the amount of data that's coming off these cameras and the organization of it. So you really have to make sure you have everything planned. Sometimes you have 6 cameras, 8 cameras. We have 14 cameras on some of the stereo shoots. So you have 14 cameras shooting, and if you have multiple cameras, it just kind of multiplies from there. So getting a handle on the dailies, organization of files, and storage is first. And then you move into editorial, and this is more traditional, where you actually see it in a timeline, and you can actually set up programs like Premiere to see through the goggles while you're editing. That's really helpful now. Like when we first started with VR, you couldn't do that. So now it's a lot simpler.
That's awesome. So where do you guys see VR going in the future?
When I first got into it, it was actually, I was here, and at first it was just like, oh, this is cool. But, actually having that experience and being that immersive experience just kind of opens you up as a filmmaker. And you say, wow, this is a new challenge. So I think what's intriguing is it's a new challenge, and it also, there are no rules. So you're building the car as you drive the car, and I think that a lot of filmmakers and a lot of creators, they're coming up with new ways to just engage the audience. And I think it's helping, the industry in a way, because people ultimately want to go back to telling stories, regardless of what happens, whether it's a gimmick, like people thought 3D was just a gimmick, but I think, 3D TVs rather, but now I see VR and AR as it expands as being something that will continue to grow and have various different applications, that you can use. They're using VR content, to help people with phobias. So now you have a person that was once directing commercials, now they're directing content that people can watch to get over phobia. So there's so many different uses. And then you got brands that are doing it. So you're doing commercials, you're doing activations. And documentary, I think, is a great way to immerse somebody and take someone who couldn't go to a place, somewhere, and let them experience a documentary. And then the narrative space is always a wonderful challenge, because you're pushing yourself, like you said, when you got into the HTC5 and you watch some of the content, you felt like everybody was looking at you.
Exactly.
So that's a whole new experience in itself.
Yeah.
And filmmakers will continue to, push themselves to figure, oh wow, how can I, develop the grammar and the language like they did with traditional film for 100 years. And I think it'll continue to grow.
How do you see the audience adapting? Like, do you see, because I know that was like a one-to-one experience with myself being in there. Do you see them sitting in a theater like this and having a similar experience?
Yeah, I think even when you go into a movie theater, you may be sitting next to someone, but that's still your story. You connect to a movie as if it's your story. You're sitting there, it's dark, and it's all about you and what's going on the screen. And yes, it may be a little closed off if you put goggles on, but I think that as we continue to grow and create, they're coming out with headsets now that don't always keep you enclosed. They have HoloLens, and they have you can name some of the other ones.
Yeah, I mean, as it expands, it's not going to be a closed headset. We're going to actually start seeing other people's avatars in there. So in your own home, you're going to put on a headset, and then you guys are going to show up as avatars, and we're going to have this conversation. We're all going to be in different parts of the world. So it really opens, like when you get into AR and VR and the crossover, it's limitless. You can start to see like training applications where you get to take apart an engine before you actually go to service it. Teleconferencing is going to be huge in VR as soon as we have the technology to map people into the environment. So you could be in your living room, and all of a sudden your friend appears on your couch, and they're sitting on your couch, and it looks like they're there.
That's awesome.
We're going to start seeing things like that. It's really exciting.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Timms, for having us.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Alton, for sharing your film with us. And Jason, thank you for walking us through the experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.